My mind is actually blown right now on two fronts, one of which is less surprising. I finally got a response from Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand's office on the Madleen being intercepted on international waters, which is almost certainly illegal. That response is frustrating, but not necessarily unexpected. But the thing that actually blew my mind is that I'm not sure the government understands its own Bill C-2. That's based on a statement that the government department sent me that seems to contain factual inaccuracies. And I was so mind blown that I was pretty sure this was wrong that I called someone and they confirmed that this is definitely wrong. I also did an interview about this bill with Shakir Rahim of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, so basically I've got a lot of updates for you. But first, as you know, Israel intercepted the Madleen on international waters Sunday night, something that was almost certainly illegal under international law. Because for that interception to have been legal, Israel's naval blockade had to be legal. And one of the conditions for its legality is that it has to not stop the delivery of humanitarian aid to civilians. So, I asked the government about the interception of the Madleen and the detention of the international civilians on board, as well as asked them about the 412 prominent Canadians and Canadians with expertise related to the issue who wrote to Prime Minister Mark Carney about the genocide in Gaza, demanding action. Today, Anita Anand's Director of Communication finally sent me a response to my request. It was 2 sentences. Quote, "The urgent need for humanitarian aid being allowed to enter Gaza is one the minister raises each time she speaks to the conflict in the Middle East, as well as the need for Hamas to release all hostages immediately, including the remains of those who have been killed, and also an immediate ceasefire to prevent further civilian deaths." The communications director also added that, quote, "The minister was also a signatory to the joint statement issued on May 19th. That statement made 2 clear demands of Israel: allow a full resumption of aid into Gaza immediately and enable the UN and humanitarian aid organizations to work independently and impartially to save lives, reduce suffering, and maintain dignity." But that was issued on May 19th. That's almost a month ago. And clearly, Israel hasn't listened. So how is that sufficient now as Palestinians are starving? I am just so frustrated. I keep emailing the government hoping to get an update on the concrete actions that folks are calling for, or if they won't take concrete action on Gaza, because to be clear, the sanctions they announced this week are only directly relevant to the West Bank. And they should have the courage to stand behind their decision to do nothing, and they should be able to defend that. But instead, these are the kinds of emails that I get. And just quickly before I move on to Bill C-2, one thing I've started getting a lot of comments about in response to these videos is people asking what they can do about this. Call your MPs, write to them, speak out on social media, because every single politician wants to get reelected. And if you make them think that their cowardly stance on Palestine is going to threaten that, then that is called political pressure. I also want to touch on Bill C-2 because I have an update on this concerning piece of legislation after hearing from government departments and having a long call with the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, who you might remember from my first video hadn't really had time to go through the whole thing yet when I first reported on this. Now, I already highlighted earlier this week several concerns that advocacy groups have raised about this bill. Migrant rights and civil liberties groups have said that this bill could create a framework for mass deportations, given it provides the government with the power to cancel immigration documents en masse for reasons determined to be in the public interest. Again, whatever that means. Other concerns include the new power for Canada Post to search letter mail, the new rules for government access to data from electronic service providers, the increased surveillance powers granted to the Coast Guard, among other changes. Now, I'm going to start with the response that I got from the Immigration Department about the changes to the asylum system, because folks are concerned about how it's going to make it more difficult for folks to seek asylum in Canada. The department told me that these proposed changes, quote, aim to make the asylum process faster and more efficient so that it can be more readily available to the people who need it most. New ineligibilities, the department said, aren't equivalent to a ban on claiming asylum. They just make the asylum process more responsive so claims are processed quickly and effectively, while ensuring Canada's commitment to protecting those in need continues to be upheld, even in times of increased claim volumes. They then reiterated the changes that they're making to the asylum system, stating that if someone tries to claim asylum more than a year after first arriving in Canada, their claim would not be automatically referred to the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, which I'm going to call the IRB for the rest of this video. And the other change, which is that asylum claims from people who enter Canada irregularly from the United States and make a claim after 14 days would not be referred to the IRB. But the department said that people who are affected by these ineligibility provisions can still apply for a pre-removal risk assessment, or a PRRA, to make sure that they are not sent back to a country where they could face harm. That sounds good. There's a backup option. But it's not as good as it sounds. Let me translate for you. See, the people who are now not going to have their cases heard by the IRB can apply for this thing called PRRA. But PRRAs have a notoriously low acceptance rate, and Canada Border Services is involved, not just the IRB. And when I say low, I mean a low acceptance rate. The government's own figures show an acceptance rate of about 6% if your claim was previously rejected by the IRB, and about 33% for people whose risk allegations hadn't been assessed before their PRRA. That's compared to about an 82% rate of positive decisions among claims accepted by the IRB in 2024, based on this table I found in a CBC article. PRRA is actually so tough that I literally found this immigration law firm bragging about the fact that they had a success story under that system, which they called notoriously difficult. Meanwhile, Pierre Poilievre reappeared yesterday to drop an especially desperate and terrifying call for severe limits on our population growth.
We want severe limits on population growth.
So yeah, I am really loving our political options right now. Turning now to the privacy concerns within Bill C-2, that's where I got a response from the Justice Department, because they kind of made me like jump around all over the place to get responses from the relevant departments. And I'll be honest, their response was confusing. Like here. They highlighted that in order to access data that is in the hands of an internet service provider, the police, quote, will need to establish a link between the information sought and its relevance to a criminal investigation and obtain judicial approval before they can obtain subscriber information. But that's literally not correct. That's not what the bill says. It's clear, if you read the bill, that it enables law enforcement and security agencies to access subscriber information without a warrant. In fact, when I interviewed Shakir Rahim of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association about this bill, this was literally one of the key concerns that his organization raised. And it's also a concern that was raised by the prominent law firm McCarthy Tétrault. So is the government moving so fast on this omnibus legislation that they don't even understand what's in their own bill? In their response to me, they also said separately that the bill will enact the Supporting Authorized Access to Information Act, which is the responsibility of the Minister of Public Safety. That is government speak for, that part's not our circus. But they did say about that, quote, this legislation is designed to ensure that electronic service providers have the capability to action lawful requests from law enforcement, such as a production order under the criminal code. But on that front, a lawful request doesn't necessarily mean a warrant. Lastly, they touched on the Canada Post stuff. But here's, again, what's wild. In their response, they literally only talked about how it removes barriers that prevent police from searching letter mail, when a key concern that is being raised is about how the bill empowers Canada Post itself to open letter mail. It literally removes that exemption specifically. See here? Other than a letter? And in the bill, it says they're replacing that with this line. But the government only responded to me about what the police are allowed to search. Overall, none of this is that reassuring. And given the public safety minister himself has acknowledged that there are components of this bill that address issues that have been irritants for the US, Shakir from CCLA warned me that it should cause us concern that we are legislating away Canadians' privacy rights on flimsy bases. What do you think of all this?